And call this meeting to order. We would like to begin by having the invocation by Greg Gibson. Afterwards, the Pledge of Allegiance by Travis Gibson and Alex Hooper.
I can hear it now.
Sense of
right here.
peace and stability, and we pray that we can accomplish the things on the agenda that need to be accomplished. These things we pray for in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Greg and Travis and Alex. We would like to mention that Debbie LeRae is not here, but she is on the phone with us. Can you hear us, Debbie?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Good to have you here with us via technology. We would like to start by approving the minutes of City Council meeting of June the 14th, 2016, and the minutes of the City Council meeting of June 21st, 2016. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
On our upcoming events, I would like to mention those. On July the 16th, we have the third annual Walker Sanderson Funeral Home Car Show from 4 to 8 p.m. on 800 North in Orem. On July the 19th, at the Cherry Hill Elementary School, we will have a town hall meeting at 6 p.m. Councilmember Mark Seastrand, David Spencer, and Mayor Brunst will be in attendance. August the 29th through September 3rd, we have the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival. August the 31st, we have the City of Orem Volunteer Appreciation Evening, 6 p.m. at the Mount Timpanogos Park. On September the 5th through the 11th, we have the City of Orem All Together Playground Community Build. September the 14th to 16th, we have the Utah League of City and Towns Annual Conference at the Sheraton Hotel in Salt Lake. October the 18th, we have the City of Orem Town Hall meeting at 6 p.m. at Bonneville Elementary School with Councilmember Lentz, Tom McDonald, and Brent Sumner. We have no appointments to boards and commissions this evening. We have no personal appearances this evening. So we will move on to consent items, and we have a motion to cancel the July 26, 2016 City Council meeting, which I will make. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie. Now we'll go on to our scheduled items. The first one is number 13, which is a resolution approving an interlocal cooperation agreement for the Home Investment Partnership Program Consortium. Presenter is Steve Downs.
No PowerPoint tonight, but for many years, the City of Orem has been part of a consortium with other communities for home funding, which is a federal funding source similar to CDBG that typically is directed towards, home and living spaces for low-income families. Historically, Orem has received about 20% of that. It's gone to some projects like the Washburn-Reams homes, which were just finished over by UVU, that are now home to a few families that couldn't have been in a home otherwise. So it goes to good use. It's also used for some down payment assistance for low-income families as well. So there's qualifications, but instead of receiving funding directly, we have a voice on a board, which is the Home Consortium, which is chaired by Provo City, Dan Gonzalez. specifically. And each year we meet and we allocate approximately $1.5 million or so to various projects, again, which we typically get about 20%, which is fair given the communities, which are Provo, us, Lehigh City, and then Utah County. A lot of different projects go on with that money, but this agreement just allows us to continue on for another 3 years in that consortium, and every 3 years it has to be renewed. So this is, again, just to allow us to continue doing what we're doing.
So it's my understanding that this is funded through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Correct.
Okay. And I noticed that Provo is putting up some homes similar to the Washburn Reams Estates this year, together with the Habitat for Humanity.
Yep.
Any questions or thoughts from the council? Yeah, Councilmember Cecil.
So do we know which projects they have planned in the upcoming, where the funding would be used primarily?
Yeah, they don't have, I mean, they have kind of ongoing projects like the loan to own, the down payment assistance. There's, projects throughout the county. One of the biggest projects that they fund that's most well known are, the organization's slipping my mind, but it's the homes that are built. There's some down in Payson. They do sweat equity, where the people in the community actually come together and basically build each other's homes. That's funded in a large part by the home funding as well. So there is a list of projects. I can provide you with a more detailed list, but yeah. So no other projects similar to Washburn Reams is planned for Orem right now.
Yep.
One of the challenges with that Kenna Matthews spoke to is the cost of land in Orem.
Yeah.
In some cases become prohibitive.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan.
Just to confirm, the 20%, it's 20% of the 1.5 million, not that it's 1.5 million, 20% of 7.5 million.
Correct.
It'd be
Yeah,
about
so
300,000 in.
historically that's been about what's used in Orem, and some again through just smaller projects, and in many cases over the last couple of years it's been because of the Washburn Reams project.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Any other comments? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, please. Dan Gonzalez with Provo City.
Yes.
Round of applause. No, just kidding.
I just wanted to mention the funds come pooled to the consortium, to the all members of the consortium, and some of the projects that have been done are not necessarily done in Orem, but spread out sometimes throughout the county. Recently, we have projects that have been funded, for example, are the senior housing project in Springville, 31 units. Another senior housing unit in Provo, about 200 north, where the Catholic Church used to be. The agency that Stephen was mentioning, self-help homes. Most of the homes that they build are in Payson because they use rural housing funding as well. So it's kind of like concentration there, but they also have built homes in Saratoga Springs and other cities within the county. Anyway, just wanted to give you an idea of what other projects have been.
That's good to hear there's some projects in South County as well.
Yeah.
What is the rent cost for those apartments like in Provo where the Catholic Church was?
It's trying to remember off the top of my head. The home program has specific rents that can be charged. For a one-bedroom apartment, I believe the maximum rent is somewhere about $580, something like that.
Okay.
If I'm correct, Dan, it can be adjusted based on the income of the tenant.
It is right. It not necessarily is the it's based on the number of members in a household.
Oh.
So if it's one member, it's less than that. The one that I mentioned to you is about for 3 or 4 household members. So it varies based on the number of households.
Sorry.
But it does take into consideration low income. In the home program, low income households are considered a family of 4. It's 80% of median area income. A family of 4 for Utah County would be around $54,500. That would be considered low income, as an example.
And I'll just say too, Dan and his staff do a great job of managing this every year and putting all the information together and organizing the presentations and kind of leading us along commend them for doing. Being a part of consortium is for us, I think, the way to go. It's managed, it's centralized, it allows more money to go to not be used for administrative costs, but instead to actually go to the people that benefit from the funding.
The benefit of forming the consortium in the county is that similar to CDBG, is funded by formula from HUD. And in Utah County, based on different aspects of it, only Provo City qualifies to receive a direct entitlement. But this program, the Home Investment Partnerships Program, has a clause that allows for contiguous jurisdictions to form a consortium. If the consortium wasn't formed, Orem, Lehigh, and the county still have access to home funds, but they have to go to the state to request those funds. This way, those funds are directed to the county.
Okay. All right, yes, Councilmember Lentz?
So Dan, one quick question. I know when we had met previously with the Provo Municipal Council, they've talked about some of their concerns related to the economic impacts of some of the neighborhoods where they're seeing, you could say, some spikes in low-income housing and things like that. In your opinion, does the Provo Municipal Council view this as exacerbating that problem, or is this essentially a tool to help address that?
It's a tool to help address that.
Okay.
One of the goals of the Provo City Council is to help this affordable housing be spread out, not just centralized in Provo or Orem, but throughout the county. So it's a tool to help promote that.
And it seems like you can get more value out of the money when you're finding projects that you can do in, throughout the county, as opposed to just looking in Orem or just looking in Provo.
Correct.
Seems like you can get more housing units available.
Correct.
Through that use.
It's easier. It's cheaper to go somewhere outside.
How does recognizing that? I'm sorry, Mayor, I didn't ask for permission to speak.
There's a button there. I'm going to get both of you to learn how to do the buttons. Anyway, keep going.
But I recognize housing is only one aspect of the challenge that the families and individuals have. How do you address some of the transportation issues they may have in, if they're living in Payson, yet they need to access facilities and different things in Provo or Orem or some of the local? How do you deal with housing issues and some of the other challenges with employment that may also be there?
We try to work with other jurisdictions. Utah County receives CDBG funding as an urban county, and the funding is managed by Mountain Lands Association of Governments. So we try to maintain and keep in close contact to make sure that we address all those things. The home funds come to the consortium just as the CDBG funds come to Orem, Lehigh County, and Provo. When we prepare this consolidated plan, that now HUD is sort of requiring us to do a more concerted effort, coordination as a regional basis. So we try to address those that way. But we also work with other agencies that don't necessarily receive HUD funding.
So they can receive as much additional help and assistance in Payson as easily as they can in any other city in the county?
They could.
Okay. Good, thank you.
If there's no other comments, Debbie, do you have any comments?
No, but I'd support it. Sounds like a good program.
Sorry, what was that?
What did you say?
Oh, I said it sounds like a good program for the county.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no other comments, I'll accept a motion to approve this resolution.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the interlocal cooperative agreement for the Home Investment Partnership Program.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Spencer?
Aye.
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 Resolution passes.
Debbie.
I'm sorry, Debbie?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd like to move on to number 14 now, which is a resolution to accept an annexation petition for further consideration, 25.53 acres at approximately 650 West, 2000 South, and our presenter is Jason Bench.
Thank you, Mayor Bruns, members of the council. This is a first step in the annexation process for the property located approximately 1720 south down to 2000 south between the Union Pacific tracks on the east and the Front Runner line, which is on the west. So that's the area. If you recall, this was the southwest area that was just annexed by the city a year and a half ago. So this does abut onto that property. It does not include the Gold Key area or this little sliver that comes up there. The county has reviewed this. This is the county's map, actually allowing us to move forward based on their a preliminary look at that. The city and the county will have 30 days after the council accepts this petition to make sure and verify that it meets the state law, and then we'll move forward after that. Just an aerial of the location. As you recall, we worked out a deal or an agreement with Provo City with 2000 South. So this area between the tracks is actually the responsibility of Orem City. So there should be no issue with Provo during this annexation. So this is the 2000 South looking west. This is the frontage of that property, and I'm looking into the property, both kind of a northwest and northeast view of the lane going down there. The applicant is here, Paul Washburn, who's representing the owners.
Could he come forward?
Sure. My understanding is that they want to rezone this to M1 at the same time when it gets to the city council.
Paul, if you want to just sit over here.
60 days to have that done and develop it as a light industrial. The action tonight is simply just to accept the petition, allow us to go through the process, and it'd be at least 60 days before it gets back to the council for consideration for annexation.
So, Jason, it's my understanding that in previous discussions there were concerns by the city as far as safety equipment goes in there. Is that still an issue, or would that be changed or developed as far as
The issue with the
fire engine access and
fire engine access deals mostly with the Gold Key section, with the bridge and things. This does not pertain to that. So there's no bridge. It's a direct access to 2000.
Okay.
So there would be no issue as far as accessing.
So, Paul, maybe I could ask you a question. What's on this property right now?
A mess.
Okay. And are you the owner? Are you representing a consortium of owners?
No, I am representing the owners. There's, I think, 6 different owners of property there. Initially, they started an annexation process about 3 years ago. City requested that they withdraw their application while this annexation to the west was moving forward. As you might recall, there were some issues with how you and Provo were going to divide up the pie there and how utilities were going to be serviced to the site. Since that has been completed, the owners of the property, and there are several, they've worked together as a committee. They have been able to go to the property owners to the west and have now have easements to be able to get all the necessary utilities to the site, sewer and water. Currently, if you go down the property, you're going to see it's, I don't even know how to describe what's there.
I've been up and down the property.
1940s style homestead at best.
And a lot of concrete.
And a lot of concrete. And the only thing I can say is until there is some regulatory authority over this property, that's probably how it's going to stay and what's going to happen with it. Currently in the county, there is no way to develop the property. County is not going to put in an industrial zone. It is not property that lends itself to any kind of a housing development or a retail development of any kind. What needs to happen is it needs to be brought into the city under the city zoning authority. M1 is a really good zone for this property, and I think will force the cleanup of the property. Right now, the owners are not putting the property to get use, but they're putting it to the only use it can be used for, and that's to raise a few goats and somebody to place to park their car, I guess.
Sure.
It's not right, but there is no other option. Once they're annexed into the city and then there are development rights, the property has value. It's got good access to I-15, both by Geneva Road or by Sand Hill Road. I think it's going to develop well. We just need to do it before it's so far developed
The wrong way.
shoddily that we don't create a long-term problem for ourselves, as has happened with Gold Key. Gold Key has been an orphan
Yeah.
everyone for a number of years, and it has served no one to the betterment to not have that under some kind of regulatory control.
Sure. Okay, Councilmember McDonald has a question afterwards. Councilmember Seastrand.
Hi, Paul. Good to have you here. I've got several questions. You said you can get sewer to it. How? Who's that going to hook into?
So this is part of the Southwest Area Overlay where the City Council approved the impact fee area. This is part of that. So these owners will be working with the property owner.
But that master plan hasn't yet
Right.
been
So
developed.
the waters will be looped, the sewer will be looped, and it'll all be done with that Southwest area.
Okay. Several questions. How is it, is there any road in there now? Is it just a dirt road?
There is actually a county road,
Okay.
and it,
Up through the middle of it, it kind of looks like, I think you had a better picture earlier that I could see.
and
Is that road in, that center road, if you will, Paul?
after a fashion.
We won't see it if you put it up there.
But okay, okay. What we'd be looking at doing, the road. Oh, push and hold. Oh, there it is.
There you go.
After this entrance, this road is going to be arched slightly, so it comes out with a 90-degree intersection with 2000.
Right, instead of
So
a,
it'll
yeah,
be straightened out. I have been working with Paul Goodrich, the city's traffic engineer.
sure.
And what we are proposing, ultimately it'll be the council makes that decision, but is a series of large turnarounds as this property is developed further to the north.
Okay,
And probably about every 500 feet, a very large turnaround, something that would accommodate a large semi-truck so that we don't end up landlocked. It's going to be difficult to develop this property in a way with the standard two entrances. The property to the north does not have an access out. There's no way we're going to get an access over either of the railroad
right.
there.
How, I know it's 25 and change acres. How wide is it east to west?
I want to say it's roughly about 500 feet.
Okay, so there's plenty of room.
650.
Okay, so there's plenty of room for a road in the middle.
I think if we go straight, it's going to be more like about 550.
But again, plenty of room to do a road down the middle and light industrial on both sides. That's kind of the plan with these periodic large turnarounds for semi-trucks.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Seastrand.
Yeah, so just clarifying, it seems like we, in the other annexation we had the ability to get water and sewer down to the corner of 12th South on Geneva Road, or 2000 South on Geneva Road. Did we find a way to get water and sewer over towards the railroad? It seems like that
Yes.
project was not approved, and therefore we did not have that.
Actually, the Mansell, who's the original applicant, is working with this property owner to actually get an easement across this property for the sewer, which will actually then work with these properties to bring it over here and then, I believe, down. The water will be looped on 2000. So they have worked out the deal that all the looping will take place with.
Going to come down the backside of the property as opposed to on 2000 South?
Right.
Okay. And then what is the property currently zoned to the north of this, also in between the two railroad tracks?
That is agriculture, open space.
Okay. And that's also part of Orem City?
Yes. The very north piece was part of the original the recent Southwest annexation.
Okay, thank you.
So, Paul, maybe you could tell me, I'm familiar with this property and I've spent time on this property in a proper way. And it's a real mess.
It is.
And I mean, it's just, there's no other way to put it. And I've, in the past, seen where the property owners didn't want to work together. But you're coming here with the idea that you have gotten them to work together.
They have,
Are you getting everybody on the same page? A lot of these property owners are older property owners. So I'm just curious how that's working out.
putting the partnership together, I think Pat Johnson probably gets most of the credit for that. You might remember she was a member of the Orem Planning Commission for 6 years and has a lot of experience and understands the complexities of getting this done. She has worked with all the property owners. Property owners approached me, it's been probably 7-8 months ago, to kind of coordinate their efforts. I don't know if this is a part of a public meeting, but the way you judge cooperation is, are people willing to open their checkbook and pay to get things done? So far, they have paid the engineering that's been necessary to be done, the time that I've spent putting things together. They have a war chest. They're committed to moving forward. I know they have worked with the Mansells and others in arranging to get the easements in place. I honestly think we've got maybe I don't want to say once in a lifetime, but a rare opportunity where everybody is pulling together, and I would like to take advantage of it.
So when you look at it, and it would be rezoned, but when you look at it, is the idea to put industrial warehouses in there? Is it to put storage facilities?
M1 would allow either of those uses. I think what we're going to have to look at as we move closer to 2000 South, I think it makes sense for light industrial that may have more traffic. And I'm not sure what those would be, but there's a lot of businesses would fall into that category. Sure. As you move further to the north, storage facilities may be as good an option as there is. In some respects, it's a very secure area. You're boundaried on both sides
Sure.
of railroad tracks, and we want things that is not going to have a rush of traffic, but just incremental traffic in and out. So I think what you're suggesting is probably a good use. As far as do the owners at this point in time have a specific use, I don't think so. The word that I have from them is they would like to get this so that it is developable, and then their plan is to market the property.
So it's going to take a lot of cleanup. It's going to be a lot of cost in moving the concrete out and
Yes.
the asphalt and all the garbage, and they're willing to do that. And are there any issues with hazardous waste in this area?
I'm not aware of anything with hazardous waste. As far as doing the cleanup with concrete, I think the city's got a very strong position. You're going to do an annexation agreement, and those kind of items that you're concerned about typically will not be a condition of annexation, but a condition of development.
Right.
That all of those things have to be taken care of.
Right. Okay. Councilmember McDonald.
I'm looking at this site map on Google Maps to go a little further to the north. I don't know if you have anything that goes up. Yeah, you do. Obviously, as you go further north, it skinnies into nothing. And the only way up there north of the yellow line, there's some kind of a facility up there off the property you're thinking about annexing. I don't know what that is. See that little place up above that, Jason? Maybe you could, right there. They have no way over the tracks either, right?
That is correct.
So they come through this property?
Yes. The road that will go through the property will be a public road.
Okay. And so they would have access to tap into it, and whatever their plans are in the future, we don't know. But at some point, it gets so narrow that it's end of the road, right? It's functionally.
We have actually talked to the people there, and they obviously have the right to change their mind. But what they've indicated is they'd like to continue as an agricultural use.
And other than a few stray cats and some old cars, it's not agricultural today, is it?
They have animals on there as well.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably just like their peace and quiet.
It's an owner that actually has a property over here that fronts Geneva Road that actually winds back, and so they own that as well. So it's not connected, but it's under the same ownership as a piece that fronts Geneva.
Any other comments from the council? Councilmember Lentz.
The last year's meeting for that annexation, that was the longest council meeting I've attended, but I wasn't sitting up here at that time, so I remember that well. My understanding of the way that the infrastructure is going to work is that the initial developer would pay to get all the water and sewer out there, and then everybody at the secondary developers, essentially, they would pay impact fees that would effectively repay that initial developer for making that initial investment. So with what is being proposed here, would the impact fees be identical in this proposed annexation as what was in the previous annexation?
They would be similar. They're trying to work together to get all the infrastructure in with this whole thing. So they're working together to put those improvements in, but they would be subject to the impact fees, yes.
What we envision at this point is not necessarily an impact fee, but a reimbursement agreement between all the parties. And so, for example, if someone in the middle of the property were to decide to develop first, they would need to bring the road at least back across the frontage of the property. The other owners have all agreed that at the point in time that they develop, they would reimburse should they not have the financial wherewithal to be able to pay going in. So the neighbors or the owners here have really worked hard to put together an agreement that I think will work.
And my understanding is the a portion of those impact fees were for things like public safety and parks and things. So that would that be? I mean, that wouldn't really be reimbursed to that initial developer. That, right?
No.
No, impact fees to the city or to the city.
Okay.
And these 60 days that we have now, before it comes to the council, we will work out any development agreement or any of those type of reimbursement agreements prior to us getting to that point. So that is something that we'll be working on to make sure that's in place before we come back.
From a functional standpoint, though, the pipes and the infrastructure would support adding these additional properties onto what they're building across.
Yes. The design that the city engineering is working with the developers on is for the entire southwest annexation area, which includes this part.
Okay, thanks.
Jamie, do you have a comment?
That was the answer to my question.
Okay, all right. Any other comments or questions from the council? Okay, I would entertain a motion. I'll make a motion. Move that we accept the annexation petition for further consideration of 25.53 acres at approximately 650 west, 2000 south. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We'll start with Councilmember McDonald.
Aye.
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 Okay, the resolution passes.
Debbie.
Debbie?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that, Paul.
You bet.
Jason. Okay, our next item is item number 15, which is a fence modification. This is an acceleration tumbling gym at 1608 South, Sand Hill Road in the HS zone, and our presenter is Jason Bench.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So tonight, this applicant is requesting a fence modification. Just to give you a little orientation, the Center Point Church, which has just finished construction, is located there. They actually sold a small piece of property on the south end of their property to Acceleration Gym. They recently received Planning Commission approval for that gym. You can see Sand Hill Road. Oops, sorry. At this location there with their entrance there. Before you tonight is the south property line. The city ordinance requires it to be a 7-foot masonry wall when it's separating between a commercial, which this is a highway services zone, and the PRD or residential zone to the south. The applicants are before you tonight to request a modification not to put the 7-foot masonry, but a 6-foot vinyl fence. If you look at the site conditions, so this would be the aerial that you see. If you look at the site conditions, the property to the south is between 6 to 8 feet higher in elevation. So in their opinion, I think that the 6-foot or 7-foot masonry or the vinyl fence would not be any different as far as the visible barrier between the two properties because of the difference in elevation. So they're before you tonight to request that modification, but it would be along this. You can see the silt fencing. That's the property line that they would be putting the 6-foot.
Is the applicant here, Jason?
I think they.
Could she come forward?
Welcome to sit here.
And could you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, I'm Whitney Stiggins, and I'm a co-owner at Acceleration.
Okay. And can you tell us the reason for this request?
Yeah, it's strictly cost. It's about 4 times as expensive to do the masonry fence as it is to do the vinyl.
Okay. I know there's some on the council have concerns over the maintenance of a vinyl fence. Any thoughts or comments there? 4 to 5 years from now, if there are broken parts, would you be maintaining it?
Yeah, we would. I mean, we're spending a lot of money on this building, and we obviously want it to look nice, and we don't want, have a fence that's falling apart. So yeah, we'll of course keep up on maintenance.
Okay. I don't have any questions per se. Debbie, do you have any questions?
There's a lot of different kinds of vinyl fencing. Well, is there a certain look or feel you're trying to get here?
We had kind of just anticipated a white vinyl, and then there are certain requirements. It goes 6 feet, and then it gets shorter at some point. So we were just basically planning on following whatever the code was.
Okay, but it will be attractive for that area. It will look good.
Yeah, it would.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember McDonald?
Jason, we've asked for masonry or concrete or whatever in the past, in part because in theory, a commercial area gets a little more activity, might get more bumps and shakes because of activity. And if we change it for this, will this predispose us to change it for other?
The council has done it in the past on different projects. The applicants have, I guess, the ability to make an application before the council to modify it.
And we've done them as one-ofs, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, this would be not the first time that the council has done that. But so it is an option in the books to allow the applicant, if they want to go through that process, to
One that I recall was on 800 North, almost in a residential area, right, where the neighbors wanted a vinyl fence and not a big masonry fence.
Right, that was recently.
That's the one I recall off the top of my head. This one kind of abuts, what's that, the freeway that's 7 foot higher? Is that a berm to the freeway, or?
That's actually the berm to the
south.
So that will be redeveloped eventually into, that's right now zoned PRD to 16 units an acre. So that will be a high density project in the future. Unless, of course, the owner comes in to modify it, but right now it would be
okay.
High density.
Pre-approved as the 16 units to the acre.
Correct. Now, the PRD to the south, because it's a PRD, the PRD does allow a 6-foot vinyl fence. So if these guys put the masonry, I mean, then the property to the south could, by right, put a 6-foot vinyl fence on the property. So it kind of is similar to that requirement, although they're in the highway services zone, so they are subject to the different requirement. So that's why they're before you tonight.
So Jason, if she puts in a 6-foot vinyl fence, then will that new development have to put in one, or will they accept the one that's already there?
Yeah, this would be. So an idea for the applicant is to partner or talk to the property owner to see if they would help with that. But the same fence would meet both requirements.
Okay. Councilmember Lentz.
Jason, have we heard from the property owner to the south there? Have they provided any input on whether they're comfortable?
I did talk to Mr. Andy Davis, who currently is the owner of that. I think it's under contract to purchase by another owner, but he indicated that he didn't necessarily like the vinyl fence. He was going to give me something in writing, but did not. And I don't see him here tonight, so I don't have an official statement from him other than he commented over the counter that he didn't like it as much. But
and I'm certainly not one to require something just because it costs more, and I understand your concern about wanting to maintain those. I'm just curious if we went with if they went with a Simtech fence versus a vinyl fence as opposed to a masonry fence, about how much more than vinyl would that cost?
That was it's about 4 times more to do.
For the Simtech, not for masonry. And for a masonry, is it even more beyond that?
Bid.
It's pretty significant. If I can just point out, this is a recent condominium project that was built. It is surrounded on the north and the west side by a 6-foot vinyl fence.
I'm sorry,
just down the road.
Just to the south.
Okay. All right. Gentleman has joined us here. Do we know, Jason, would you want to introduce yourself?
He's the other owner.
The other owner, okay.
I'm the developer, Greg.
Oh, you're the...
So I'm helping Whitney and Brooke. She mentioned that it was a cost issue. Initially on, as we went through the process with Orem City, we never knew of the fence requirement until literally it was our 3rd revision, and they realized, because that property to the south was zoned residential, that in the code technically now they have to put a fence up, because all the property owners to our south or to our north, they don't have fences up.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a budgetary item that was never even figured a fence, period, let alone, this type of fence that they were requiring. And then on top of that, the land is, 7 feet at least taller than we are. So whatever the fence that we put on, it's not going to serve any purpose. Plus, there's a ditch between the properties. Right to the south of our property is like an irrigation ditch as well. So you go off his property into it. And so that's really the reason we talked to Jason, saying in these circumstances, if you look around, we'll be the only property with all these commercial pieces that even has a fence.
Okay.
So that it's not when you hear costs, some people get frustrated, but it wasn't just the cost of a fence, but we weren't ever planning on a fence, period. And so when you drive down Sand Hill Road, you'll see no fence, no fence, no fence, fence.
Okay.
And that's really
Jason, do you have a comment on that?
Just to clarify, between commercial properties, a fence is not required. It's only when it abuts a residential, which is why you don't see the fences down there.
Councilmember Seastrand?
Yes, so in looking at that aspect, tell me, what was the expectation when the current the previous property owner, I mean, they finished their church, are they not required to have put a fence up at the end of their process?
They were doing it in phases, so they did the north half in that phase and left the south half.
So I
for
still
future.
see part of the south half of their phase is connecting, it has the same issue with the PRD.
Right, so when they come in and develop the rest of their property, we will require that fence.
What is left to be developed on the rest of the property?
I think half of that, that probably doesn't show it. But
They've done
this
parking.
portion is not asphalted or it's not parking, it's just fallow until they decide to
Do
put.
we know
build.
what they're planning on? We don't, do we?
We don't, nope.
Okay.
So are they separate parcels then? I mean,
Same parcel, but we have allowed phasing so that they don't have to do the entire project. If they're only going to focus on the north half in this instance, we would require all the requirements on the north, and when they come in for the phasing, then the rest of the property would be brought up to code.
but on the current phasing, on the current requirement of the owner of that property, that they currently do have to put up a 7-foot fence, masonry fence,
They-
per the agreement with
If it's residential.
the current zoning, right?
Right. So when they do develop it, they will have to put that fence or come back to the council for a modification. Yes.
Interesting.
Councilmember Lentz, do you have another comment?
So this is just kind of a gut feeling. I'm curious to get your take on this. If we were to continue this to a later time to give you more opportunity to visit with that property owner to the south, see if you can find some kind of compromise, because part of my hesitation in voting in favor of this exception is it would be at the expense of that neighbor to the south, where they have a reasonable expectation, according to the city ordinance, that this is what would be required. So I'm not sure what the compromise might look like, but have you had conversations with them before? Have they been willing to work with you? Is that something that would be worth the time and effort?
We actually haven't spoken with the property owner. Obviously, what I would think is we should pay for the whole fence ourselves. I mean, they're going to get a free fence one way or the other, but.
And this, the vinyl fence, if they would have broken ground first, they would have had to put up a fence as well, was our understanding. And it would have been vinyl or chain link, I think, is what they could have done at the 6 foot.
Jason, is that consistent with?
That's consistent for their side, but if these guys came in second, we would still require them to put the masonry, so they would still need to, they would have to take that out and put the vinyl without having a modification from the council. So it either gets modified for the north property, or in the future, if, let's say, the south property developed first, and they put a vinyl fence without a modification, we would require them to put the 7-foot masonry, because it would be next to a residential.
So based on the order, because they're going first, if they put up a fence that meets the requirement, then the neighbor to the south does not need to put up any fence at all, whereas if they went first, they could put up a vinyl, but then you would still need, to meet this requirement, you would still need to put up masonry or Simtech.
Or get a modification, right.
So I'm wondering maybe if that could be the starting point of that conversation, to say, you're going to save some money because you don't need to put up a fence. Could we work together on this? So I'm not trying to dictate this is what you need to do, but I'm just, when we're asked to make an exception to the city code at the expense of another property owner, that's what I'm struggling
Well,
with.
the property owner, like I mentioned, I talked to him on Friday. He's well aware of it. He got a notice, so I'm not sure why he's not here if he has an issue. But
Councilmember Sumner.
You say the main reason is the expense, vinyl over the concrete. What, can I ask you how much difference that is, dollar-wise?
It's about, it's about 28,000 versus about 7,000 is the difference.
And that's the sole purpose for the request, basically, isn't it?
Okay, any other comments from the council? Councilmember Seastrand?
Well, I wasn't here when this original ordinance was put in. It seems like the intent was when we have a place, an area like Costco or Target, that the neighborhood behind it was saying, look, we want some protection, that we're not having a lot of people jumping over the fence, taking shortcuts, moving through the area, that part of the reason for the 7-foot masonry fence was an element of clear delineation between a commercial and a residential, and to create a bit of a barrier that protects the residential aspect of it. Is that basically, as you recall, on that, Jason?
That's fair, yeah.
And it is a little bit of a long-term preservation issue. I think there is a interesting question on how long do vinyl fences last, and from a standpoint of, so I'm running through my mind. Okay, are there reasons why there would be people jumping the fence for shortcuts here? You know, I don't know. With the development to the south, while the property currently is higher from a standpoint of where they've deposited a fair amount of fill, is that the logical area where that land is going to end up, or are they going to be taking some of that fill out? I don't know. It depends on.
At this point, we don't know.
Yeah, so there's the aspect of saying we're not exactly sure what's going to happen in the southern part. If they changed it, if they came and made a request to change it to commercial and we approved it, then the need for your fence would not be there. So I don't know. In a way, having the undeveloped residential property to the south of you is a little bit of a disadvantage at the moment in terms of trying to develop. At the same time, my thought goes that when the current property owner did their development plans, there was no discussion. It was that a 7-foot masonry fence was going to be going there. That was not part of the question. So I don't know. I think that's where a few concerns come with the uncertainty of what is actually going to happen to the south. A little bit of uncertainty of how do you maintain a clear delineation or designation between a commercial and a residential property. It is an interesting question because some unknowns are in there. So just rambling again.
I think there's some other options too available to us. I haven't talked to Whitney about this or Brooke, but there's multiple vinyl fences that we choose from. White is something that someone doesn't want to look at. There's a myriad of options that we can pick. These vinyl fences nowadays have lifetime warranties. They're super durable. As far as jumping from one,
the elevation grade.
Elevation, I think, would stop a bit. Even more than that, there's literally a creek that comes between the properties. So they're going to get.
But is that going to stay there? I mean, when they develop that, are they going to?
That'll have to be determined whether it's piped or if it's something that needs.
Is that drainage or what is that goes through there? I can't imagine it's irrigation.
That might be part of the Taylor drain. There's a Taylor drain that runs down through this property somewhere along there. I think it's further south, so it's probably just more of a leftover irrigation. That used to be the tree farm.
Is it used for anything other than?
At this point, I don't know if it is. But that's something that when the south property develops will obviously have to be resolved.
Addressed, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Steve, you've got a question or comment?
Yeah, I wanted to double check the requirement of the masonry fence in the ordinance, and the requirement comes into play when you have a commercial, manufacturing, or professional office development adjacent to a residential zone, not a commercial zone. So in this case, where you've got a church on the property that's adjoining, if the whole property were used by the church, you would not have a masonry fence requirement because that's not commercial, manufacturing, or professional office. So just to clarify, I think that question was asked if the church would have to put the masonry fence up, and they would not.
What would they have to put up, Steve?
They wouldn't have any requirement.
And what does this have to put up? Because it's not. I don't.
So what I guess what I was just trying to answer the question is what would the church have had to do if there was, the whole property was the church, and the answer is nothing. But if you do have a commercial use that goes next to that property, then that requirement does come into play. Then they do have to put in that masonry fence.
Now, you had mentioned commercial manufacturing or professional office, but this is not commercial manufacturing.
I believe it is considered a commercial use.
It is a commercial use, but not manufacturing.
Correct. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's commercial, manufacturing.
Okay,
not commercial manufacturing.
Okay,
sorry.
Makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
thank you.
So from that, then you're saying that the boundary line to the west is not going to have any fence requirement at all.
If that stays as a church. Now, if they subdivide the property and put another commercial use on it, then they would have to have the
residential.
or Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Go ahead.
or if that residential area gets developed, they'll have to put in a 6-foot vinyl fence.
If which residential?
The people to the south.
Whoever's first.
Yeah.
No, the church would never have to.
Well, no, it's not, the obligation's not on the residential, it's on the commercial, when the commercial development.
No, I think this PRD requires it because it's 16 whatever.
A PRD does require a fence, not necessarily a vinyl fence.
A fence.
A fence.
A 6-foot.
6-foot fence.
So assuming that this group to the south ever gets developed where that green line is, would require a fence. And certainly not a masonry.
No, not if it stays a PRD.
If it stays the PRD in the, okay. Good clerk.
Councilmember Spencer has a question.
So on the fence to the south, we're requiring them the 6-foot fence all the way to with the green line too?
No.
Or just the yellow?
Just the yellow. Because the church maintains ownership of that.
And what is the square footage of that line of fence that you're putting in?
I'm not sure if I can. About 350 feet, looks like. Let's see right there.
Looks like 350.
So a question, Steve, maybe you could help us, maybe not, but when was this code put in about a masonry fence dividing commercial from residential?
Well, I couldn't tell you exactly, but it's been there as long as I can remember, going back 19 years.
So my question is, Jason, since this period of time, fencing's changed a lot. There are different kinds of masonry fence. There's cement fence, there's composite plastic fence, there's vinyl fence. I wonder if we need to relook at this part of the code and because what we're saying here is masonry is what needs to be put in there, but that was back in the day when we didn't have all these different kinds of fences. So,
we did make an exception about 4 or 5 years ago to put in the Mighty Light, which is the polypropylene,
that's
whatever.
the Simtech fence.
Simtech. And so that is an exception that was added about 5 or so years ago. So we did look at that then to determine that that would be an equivalent to a masonry fence. But what I'm understanding is now maybe vinyl's gone a little farther down the road.
And what I'm struggling with a little bit here is I don't know what a vinyl fence costs. I mean, I know what they're saying versus what a composite fence costs versus what a cement concrete fence. So they have masonry fence, but they also have pre-made, pre-stressed concrete fences. And so there's, plus the chain link fence, plus the wood fence, there's a whole list of fences. And what these people are saying is the reason that they want to get away from the masonry fence is cost. So my question is, quality and cost. It'd be nice to have for me anyway, it'd be nice to have a chart of all the different kinds of generic fences that are out there and basically what their costs and lifespans are, just so we know what we're dealing with a little bit here. I don't know if we could get that, but I would love to have that in the future just as to understand the fencing situation. Okay. So Debbie, do you have any questions?
No, I'm just trying to listen and learn.
Okay. Any other comments from the council? Councilmember Lentz?
So along with that, I think it would be helpful to have not just the cost comparison, but also the performance comparison. If the reason that we're doing this is to be a sound barrier, how much does that actually reduce sound from one side of the wall to the other? If we were looking at this from the perspective, are we willing to take another look at the ordinance and make an adjustment to the ordinance itself because the circumstances have changed, better materials are available, I think I'd be more willing to consider that. But as it currently stands, we have, we're asking for an exception for one property owner at the expense of another property owner. And to me, I'm hesitant to make that recommendation. So.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Councilmember Seastrand?
Well, I think a couple of the issues are, the mayor, you mentioned the durability of the quality of the product. I think it's a little bit hard to legislate over the long term, but I think if the vinyl fence is well maintained, it seems to do the trick. I don't think the sound barrier. I don't think there's a sound barrier issue. Your bigger issue is going to come from the freeway, as opposed to from this to the residential. I think the height is a question, but I'm drawn back to where if a PRD wants to put it in, then it's a 6-foot fence. Which I guess I'm feeling okay about it. I like if this was abutting a single family backyard, I would say no. A masonry 7-foot fence seems to make sense, or it's abutting a PRD that has a 6-foot fence requirement. I guess I'm a little more inclined to feel it's an okay solution.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. Anyone choose to make a motion?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll make a move. I'll move that we accept the proposal. Is there some specific language you'd like me?
Yeah, so
I would move that we approve the fence modification to allow a 6-foot vinyl fence along the south line property of the applicant's property at 1608 South Sand Hill Road in the HS zone.
is there a second? Okay. Debbie, we'll go ahead and go to you first.
Aye.
Okay.
Can I ask a question while we're in this process, or am I out of line there?
Well, we do have a motion and a second, and we're taking a vote, so.
I want a clarification.
Go ahead.
Vote. These people, as all people do at the front end, say they'll maintain it. What's our enforcement if it isn't maintained?
It is a site plan approval, so if it is in disrepair, we will, as a site plan requirement, go after not go after, but try to enforce.
Put them in.
Send the police over?
Right.
And this stuff there.
It will be an enforcement thing that we will pursue.
Okay. Thank you.
So would you like to cast your vote?
I'd say aye.
Aye?
Nay.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the resolution passes. Thank you. The modification. Jamie, are there any communication or city manager items? Okay, I would accept a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.